Hi, everybody. We're back today with another look at the films of the 2010s. This time it's war films, 2010 to 2019. Here with AYBL Maine, Brian. Check his channel out, sub him up, and Doc. And be interested to see if we have some common ground here because there weren't an overabundance of war films, to my knowledge, but we had to come up with five, and we'll see how we do. Brian, what do you have for your top five?
uh, Me, I kind of made sure that sometimes I go, well, is it happening in a wartime setting? Because sometimes I'll add those in too,
Yeah,
because I sometimes I think things that might be going on behind the scenes and not necessarily on a battle line is just as important and just as part of the war as anything else. So some of those may fall into that category.
good.
Number five, I've got Fury. It's a 2014 film, David Ayers. It's about a tank unit that's rolling through Germany at the time. I think Brad Pitt is the lead guy in there. Shia LaBeouf is the new guy that they bring in. John Berthal is also in it. It's kind of interesting in that it shows you just how horrific the actions are of even American soldiers in war when they're not actively in battle, because there's a couple scenes in there where they're in somebody's house and they're taking advantage of the family that's there, and not just from food and everything, but they're eyeballing the daughter and stuff like
Yeah,
that. So there's a lot of insinuation stuff that's going on. I thought that it was kind of a powerful film from that standpoint. Number four for me was Dunkirk. I saw this in the theater, and I can't imagine seeing it in any other way. I just like three or four different stories going on at the
yeah,
same time. The story on the beach, the story in the air,
yeah,
story out at sea, trying to send rescue ships to get there. And it seems like every time the characters get in a position to where they could get to safety, something bad happens again, and then they're like forced to get off of a vessel that they're on. I got to tell you, I would not want to be in a sealed anything that's trying to get off of a shore that's being bombed. I can't imagine that scenario there could ever work out good for you.
no,
It was crazy. That's got to be seen on the big screen though. Everything that's happening in there is just fantastic. The cinematography, the shooting of it is just great. Everybody's got to see it. Number three for me was it's like a comedy drama. Taki Watiti, the same guy who does Thor Ragnarok. It's called Jojo Rabbit.
yep,
It's about a little kid who's part of the youth Nazi organization, and he thinks he wants to be a good little soldier. And at the same time, he kind of finds out his mom, who's played by Scarlett Johansson, is like harboring Jewish individuals, hiding them from the Germans and everything. And also, it's got this quirkiness to it in that the kid is best friends with an imaginary Hitler, who's actually played by Taki Watiti. So it's got this weird, quirky things that are always going on that is just the imagination of a child.
yeah.
But it does touch on some important subject matter, so it's worth seeing. I kind of liked it. I thought it was interesting. Number two for me was Darkest Hour, basically just on the performance of Gary Oldman alone as Winston Churchill. Just woof,
I
just
agree.
blew me away. It's one of those movies. Even my wife will say, "Let's throw in that movie." I mean, and she does not like war movies of any kind, but she loves that movie. His performance, she just fell in love with. So just
Yeah,
on the performance of Gary Oldman alone, I got that number two. But number one for me by a long shot, and it really kind of upset me when it lost for Best Picture. But I understand the reasoning that I've heard from other people. 1917. Uh, the movie's completely shot in one shot. The whole movie. There's no cut. There's no cross cutting. No fade outs coming back in. Everything's done in one shot. There's one time where I thought maybe they used a second camera where the two soldiers jumped into the water, and the camera went down below for a second and then came back up with the individuals. It felt like it was a different camera when that happened. One, because the lens wasn't wet at all when it came back up. I thought that was like the only moment where maybe they could have used a second camera, but that I guess they didn't. They said it was completely in one shot. So I admire the film for that. It's got a really great story, superb cast that goes on all through it. but basically about two soldiers that are given instructions that they got to try to get information to this general not to attack this certain place because it will spell certain doom for the troops if they go in there. So they're trying to get across enemy lines to get that information to them. So, but just for that aspect alone, I gave it major props, and I gave 1917 my number one.
I can see why.
Yeah.
Very
nice.
good.
Very nice.
Nicely done. How about you, Sean?
We have a few here, Brian. I think we got three, buddy. So
all right.
Yeah, I think we got three. My number 5 is going to be The Imitation Game. I like this movie a lot, actually. This is basically, maybe I like these mathematicians and stuff like this, because there's another British mathematician who's been, basically they're the government's requiring people to come in to see if they can help break the Enigma code here that they've it's on a cycle every 12 or 24 hours at midnight. I think it switches over every night, and they're trying to figure out, and a whole bunch of these mathematicians are getting together trying to come up with something to basically decode these things in a certain time frame, and this guy does it. And it's a true story. It's a sad story too, because of the ending more than anything about what actually transpired with this guy's life, which is not really fair in one sense. I'm trying to remember the fellow's name. It's Alan.
Alan Turing.
Alan Turing, thank you. It's just sad on what actually happens to him after the fact. But I mean, for what this guy actually did during the war, I mean, this guy's basically ending the war. In technical terms, that's what he's kind of doing. And how he goes about it, and not releasing all the information over a certain amount of time and stuff like this, because you can't do it too fast, because then the Germans are going to catch on that we figured it out, and they'll start switching things over. And then the banter, just because he's enamored with another girl, and them talking and finding out how they're actually having conversations with each other, interacting even with the Germans on how they actually figure out that there's also like a little code before they actually get into sending the Enigma code to what's actually going to happen for what they're going to do that day. I think
they had to start picking and choosing. They had to start picking and choosing who they save and who they don't, right? Because you can't tip your hand by saving everybody.
That's exactly it. So they started doing strategic spots and everything else, and how they were doing things. So, the Imitation Game, it's a true, based on a true story. All these things probably have some sort of underlying truth to them at one point or another, and it's like I said, there's a sad ending to it in one sense. Post is one thing, but the Intimidation Game is a pretty good war flick or wartime movie, war era movie. My number 4 is Zero Dark 30. This one is just, it's almost like a reality check. It's an up-to-date, right? This is Osama bin Laden. This is going in and getting him. This is after everything 9/11, and there's a whole bunch going on in here that did transpire. There's a lot of truth in this. I don't know how much truth, but there is a lot of truth to what actually happens here, and the lengths that, the undercover side of things, and how far that they would have to dive deep into these things, and the undercover operations inside, getting the information just to find out where this guy's at. And this is over a long period of time. So this is, and it's a war movie in one sense that, obviously this is happening for a reason. So Zero Dark 30 is kind of like a modern, almost masterpiece movie for war in the sense that a lot of these are historical war movies. I would put Zero Dark 30 in the more up-to-date versions of something a little bit more that has to be seen, to be honest with you. The more recent history, but very relative, I think, too. So that's my number 4. Number 3 is Fury. So there you go, Brian. So Brian, you probably figured out how we got the 3 here now, don't you? Eh? Yeah. So Fury's number 3 for me. Yes, I do like Brad Pitt in this. I found the action in this movie and the story behind it, like you said, there's almost like the 2 elements, because you're right. They do have the scenes in the houses with the women and stuff like this, and pretty tense at times too. And especially for the women in those scenes, it's very tense for them. but it's shown as that, and it's really well made. If you can feel it from the other side when you're watching these guys for the first hour before it actually gets to something to that effect in a movie, really well done, really well done. But the other side is the battle scenes and everything else that happens in this war movie, which are split-second decisions these guys are making, and the flankings and everything else that these guys are doing that's probably happening on the warfield at the time, just to stay alive. And you get ambushed left, right, and center at some of these places, and you're going down road you don't know you're going down either. So really well acted. I thought the show was very well. It's Fury is a very good war movie, man. Very good war movie. My number 2 is Dunkirk. So yeah, Brian touched on it because there's a lot of different things happening in this movie. There is basically 2 or 3 different things happening at any given time in this movie. There's an air fight, there's a dogfight in the air, there's some ships getting blown up, or subs, you got the boats, the harbor, you got the land, you got it all happening. That's showing a lot of what's happening in a war movie really well for just over 2 hours, man. This is I say this quite often when I find that these things are like this. It's high-end movie making, man. This is serious stuff, man. This guy's putting together, it's incredible what they're showing to you. The cinematography that Brian touched on, this is visually, this is stunning to look at when they get onto the beach, and then they're up in the sky, and then before you know it, you're in the boats, and all these different things, and the story behind it is quite incredible to go with it. So Dunkirk is kind of it was Dunkirk or my next one, obviously, so we know what's going to be now. But visually, these things are incredible to look at, and it's a war movie. You're not seeing anything special as far as let's get out the popcorn. These are stories being told about what's happened in life here previously. These guys are showing something that's incredible, if you ask me. So, but yeah, my number 1 is 1917. So I cannot get around the fact that visually this is a masterpiece. This is just Sam Mendes, who made Skyfall and stuff like that. Now you don't have to be a big fan of James Bond to actually enjoy that movie, because visually, to look at Skyfall, for instance, to go back, it's incredible to look at. I mean, there's scenes in that movie that are just spectacular. This movie is just up a notch or 2 on this, man. This is just like Brian touched on. There's scenes, and I've watched some different things on it, even the making of it, Brian. So there is some different cuts that they do throughout it, and you actually have to see it even when they're going in the tunnel. The first 9 minutes of that shot going into the tunnel has one cut in it. Mm-hmm. But you can't see it. It's when they go around a crowd and the camera goes one way and there's a crowd and they go around the other. That's a quick cut, and then they come back and they're coming right at you, right? So and how they walk back out into the field before you know it, they're in the field, but they go under this piece of wood. That's the cut. The cut is at the piece of wood, and then they keep on going from there. So I don't know who's thinking. Visually, it's incredible. The night scenes are shot fantastic. And obviously the story about saving the 1,600 or so soldiers, getting in to tell the general not to invade this area. And it's these 2 guys that are sent on basically a suicide mission in one sense or another, because they're going into German territory to stop this from happening, man. So this is definitely the war pick for me for the decade.
Yeah, it's a big time movie for sure.
Totally.
The one that I want to touch, well, there's 2 I want to touch on. Fury, I haven't seen, so it sounds like I would like it based on what you guys are telling me. And the other one is Jojo Rabbit. That was my number 6, if you will. That just missed cutting it. I really like that story too, but I really, to be honest with you, didn't know how to tell it. It's so obscure. It's so different a kind of movie.
Yeah.
Brian did a good job describing it.
Yeah, he did. Very good.
I thought it's well worth checking out. It is in the little boy's sort of imagination, yet he's stuck in this horrendous scene with his mother sheltering the Jewish people in the attic or whatever, and great stuff. Scarlett Johansson's very good in that movie too. But my number 5 is The Imitation Game. Doc had that one. I really enjoyed this movie too. With this Alan Turing, it's sort of a espionage biopic kind of film. These geniuses, analysts, whatever they're doing, breaking the German code, decrypting these messages that are for the British government during World War II. And I found the whole thing very interesting. It gets into his personal life a little bit. Good acting here by Benedict Cumberbatch as well. Keira Knightley as his friend, his little sidekick there. The girlfriend. She's not really a girlfriend, but she's his co-worker, I guess.
Almost girlfriend.
Almost.
Yeah, it's almost. Yeah, it was one of convenience.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think
exactly.
both of them would admit that. Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's an interesting story and a true story.
Yeah.
For the most part. Number 4 is Dunkirk. The reason it's a little lower on my list than maybe it would have been, I did not see it on the big screen, and I think that hurt it. I saw it on regular television screen, and this is one that has to be experienced in the theater. I could tell right away the way the cinematography and all the technical achievements, brilliant music. It shows the 3 perspectives: the land, the air, and the sea. Great job. There's very little dialogue in portions of this movie. They're just showing this stylish kind of approach. It's kind of detached in a way. You're not getting maybe the humanistic stuff that you would get in other war films. In parts you are, especially with the people, the townspeople on the boats. They come to the rescue as well. Which I didn't realize happened in history, where you had the people from the little town there getting involved as well and rescuing some of the people that were stuck out there on the ocean. So I really think they did a tremendous job. But how many extras did they use in this movie too to recreate? I mean, it was very realistic. Now, Christopher Nolan, of course, is the director of that, who I've had some problems with in the past with his time, sequences and stuff. But I think this is an effective movie. Dunkirk. Number 3 is Darkest Hour. Doc mentioned the Gary. Was it Brian?
Brian had this one.
Brian had this one with the Gary Oldman performance as Winston Churchill. Fantastic. He comes across as sort of an eccentric character, which I didn't realize he was. He's got these quirks and stuff, and he's kind of an angry little guy. He's yelling at the secretary and things, but he got the job done. He was a newly appointed British prime minister, and there's all kinds of pressure on him to decide whether to listen to his advisors and negotiate with Hitler, or be bold and enlist the people of the UK to be vigilant and fight on. And we know the history of that. Ben Mendelsohn plays King George here. Kristen Scott Thomas as Mrs. Churchill. A good movie, directed by Joe Wright, who also did what's the movie I'm thinking of with Keira Knightley? I can't remember the name of it, but he's a pretty good British director. And this happens in May of 1940, and Dunkirk actually happens right in the midst of all this, right after this, the real Dunkirk incident. So that's why I put them back to back. Number 2 is Zero Dark 30. It almost was my number 1. That decade-long hunt for Osama bin Laden, a true story, directed by Catherine Bigelow. CIA tactics using to extort information out of these guys to get to bin Laden, to find out where he's holed up somewhere, and eventually the Navy SEALs come in and take care of business. Post 9/11 film. It took 10 years. Took till 2011 to hunt him down and get him. Jessica Chastain's very good in this movie. As Jason Clarke, good performances. This was number 1 until about 2 weeks ago, when I finally saw 1917, and that took my number 1. So we have the trifecta back in force. I couldn't not make this number 1. I mean, it was just such a good movie. You guys have described it, the trenches and that whole sequence to begin the film, the mission where they're going across enemy lines, and they get involved with going through these muck and mire of dead bodies and tripwire and barbed wire with guys on fences, half mutilated. And then they get into this mine where this rat trips off some kind of bomb, and this mine comes down and almost kills them there. Then there's a plane that comes out of nowhere and knocks down this little farmhouse. That was a cool scene.
A great scene.
Cool scene. And the German gets out. I don't want to say what happens after that, because it affects the movie. But this is one odyssey that this man went through. The two guys that were sent out actually
Yeah.
to go deliver that message to the general on the front lines there. Unbelievable. I don't think I've ever seen a movie like it. It's so
Yeah.
well filmed and different.
Mhm.
You know, usually you get, you know, the whole platoon out there. You've got two guys here running this mission through these trenches, through all these half-eaten bodies, or I can't even describe it. It was so realistic, so well done that it had to be my number one. That's Hell on Earth, and it's one hell of a war film. So that would
Awesome.
be. I'm
We
glad
did
we
it.
finally hit
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Trifecta, baby. And the thing is, no, people, we do not discuss these in advance. This is
No.
our own
No.
thoughts. This is what we came up with. So I noticed that Hacksaw Ridge, which was Oscar nominated, did not get on anyone's list.
Oh.
That's interesting. And I will make a vow to see Fury, because I do want to check that out since it was on both your lists.
Yeah, it's a good one, Rich. You'll like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That's going to wrap up our war films for the 2010s.
Okay.
Appreciate everybody watching. Leave us the feedback like we always ask. Like to see some lists, some top 5 lists from everybody out there. What's your favorite war film of that decade? What were the best ones out there? And for Brian and Doc, I'm Rich. We'll see you next time. We're coming back with drama films in our next segment, so be sure to join us. Thanks a lot. Bye.